He said that at the time his recollection was that he recalled the individual being very sincere about the subject, and we discussed the matter, and he said he saw no problem with it, and their board voted to allow what turned out to be, I guess it's Jacob, that was his brother, as I recall. He did mention that ropes and tassels, Nathan did to me, mention that ropes and tassels identify educational achievement, and his question was, what about community service? And so I felt that that was a very sincere reason for wanting to do this. I explored it with him and promised that I would present it to the board for consideration. Marie.
Nathan also presented his entire experience as his senior project, and we had senior project night last Wednesday. So I followed up with him, and he was very respectful. He said that he understands that the board may have different views on protocol, and I asked him if whichever way the board wanted to go, would he be willing to think of some alternatives to walking into the procession with his helmet, such as storing it under his chair and being able to walk it up to receive his diploma. He said that would be very acceptable to him, and he would go anyway. And he said, I totally understand that the board is the governing board and would go along with whatever they said. And I was really impressed with his open-mindedness and, as you said, his dedication. And he directed his entire student, his senior project, to talking about his experience as a New Hampton firefighter. So I was very impressed with him as well, and just really just wanted to, get his sense of how flexible he was with the way he did this, and he was very open to whatever the board may allow.
Thank you.
We talked also about setting precedent, and would this possibly open the door to other students who say, well, it's really important to me to do this, etc. And so it was very open-minded, and I just was very impressed with his level of maturity about the whole topic.
The second individual, I'm not as knowledgeable about the details of, but I understand that it's a request from an individual whose dad is a veteran who fought on behalf of the country overseas and is now back in time for her to receive her diploma, and the request is that he be allowed to present her diploma to her at graduation day. Now, I will comment, and keep me honest on this, that historically, I guess it has been tradition that any of the employees who work in the district are allowed to present their child who's graduating with his or her diploma as a precedence. Any comment? Concerns?
Well,
Sue?
I feel that these are not shallow requests. These have been thought out very thoroughly and seriously. And I think that if it does set a precedent with the diploma by the veteran parent, then so be it. It's a good precedent to set. And I think there's a lot of history that goes with the other request too, for the fireman's helmet. And I think Marie had a very, very good suggestion of allowing him to keep it under his chair and walk up to get his diploma with that. So.
Seems to be a reasonable compromise if the board is interested in that approach for that particular request. I happen to want to hear from Lloyd.
Well, I'm always on the one out, but I can truthfully say my boy as a fireman has been over 20 years. My grandchildren had things, grown up. I'm a veteran, so I can cover all aspects of the wars. And I just look at things today and I think everything's gone wacky. I'm sorry. But I mean, everybody comes home from the war as a hero. And I'm sorry, there are heroes. I'm not, every war. But I went through, when I seen World War II and Korean War, the heroes. But today, but fireman, policeman, I was a policeman, everything you do was a hero. And to me, I mean, it's blown out of proportion, you know, and I think it's time to get our feet on the ground, and I don't think we're gonna start a precedence. And next thing you know, my grandson was an Eagle Scout, but he never wanted anything to wear his uniform up there for an Eagle Scout. I think it's just, you start something, you're gonna have everything, you know?
Go get shots in your back so you feel better, will you?
I was an Eagle Scout, I didn't wear my uniform. So I can speak truthfully, I've been through the whole ringer and done it all, and seen it all, and you know, special things. But today, I mean, I look at TV, one kid come home, his father come back from the war, and he come back and he runs into the school. And now every school has got them every week, there's something coming on every week, so it's gone out of hand. And that's what happens, and you kill what the intent was in the beginning. It's just a show, as far as I'm concerned, and that's just, I don't know, if I was wearing a fireman hat, I don't know, we had policemen, we
Moving
had
right along.
high school kids working as policemen with us on that, and they didn't want to wear their cap and everything to, you know, some help. I'm just against both of them, sorry.
I feel differently about the two of them, so I'm in favor of the veteran parent and not in favor of the fireman's hat, because I do think it'll lead to other things, Boy Scout uniforms and, yeah. And they're getting the diploma from the school, not their fire department.
Well, we solved this under action items, so.
Yes, we do. Any
Yeah.
other commentary?
But my graduation, we had one of the girls' brothers surprised her and came home from Iraq and presented her with her diploma. And everyone understood it was just a special exception, but it was really sweet. So,
Thank you for that comment.
so I'll throw that up there.
We can,
And everyone cried.
we can consider that as having occurred under item 8. So that you do that prematurely. One of the things that I choose not to do as your chair is drag opinions out of any of the members. If none of you want to say anything about this topic, I am going to just assume that you have spoken up. If you don't want to speak about it, I'll assume that you don't intend to, and therefore I don't have to ask for your opinion. One other thing I learned at the New Hampshire School Boards Association breakout session for school chairs that I attended on the evening of the senior projects. Unfortunately, I was unable to go to both. Was that it's my responsibility as your chair to try to be sure that anyone who wants to has spoken on the topic. That said, I just wanted to share with you my personal philosophy on that, and if there are no further comments, we will move on to the next item. Does anyone else want to speak to this issue? Okay. There being none, we will move on to policies for first reading. We have policy BBB, school board elections. I would point out for Bob's edification, this is not to be confused with the topic we just spoke about. This has to do with a change that the policy committee put forward regarding our staff liaison
But
position.
actually, the first line is exactly the status quo, that the school board shall consist of 7 at-large members, 1 from each 7 towns, elected by the qualified vote. So I think that really, the first line, it does reaffirm where we are currently.
Well, that's the current policy.
Right.
But the change to the policy has to do with adding a faculty liaison position. Is there any comment on the policy as written? Okay, there being none, we will move on to policy BG, which is related to the same topic and the proposed integral change that the policy committee felt would address the issue. And you have it before you for its first reading as it currently exists. Any concerns, questions, or comments? Sue?
Well, once I read this again, and it was all in one piece, a couple of things concerned me. On the first paragraph, it seems that the last sentence, starting with the board members, should really go before however, staff members. It seems to me that should be the next to the last, and however should start the last sentence.
I see what you're saying.
I have one editorial suggestion for that sentence, that communications with staff, not by staff. Because the board members are communicating with staff.
Such communication.
So the edited version would
Right.
say, staff may communicate with individual board members about school district matters. The board members will view such communications with staff as personal and informal communications. However, staff members and individual board members will not communicate about employment or personnel-related matters.
I would actually drop however. It doesn't make any sense when it's put at the end.
And would you change the or to nor because it's a negative, will not communicate about employment nor?
Yes.
In the second paragraph, in the first sentence.
Now, hold on,
oh,
can
I'm
you
sorry.
review the changes to the first paragraph explicitly?
That we're swapping the final two sentences and changing the or to nor, taking out however, and changing by to with.
Okay, by to with I've done. I don't see the or to nor.
The
It-
line right up above,
Right
employment
above
or
it.
personnel would be employment nor personnel.
Personnel or, so it should be nor.
Will not communicate,
Not communicate about employment nor personnel,
should be neither.
okay?
Do you need a nor?
And-
Do you need a neither with a nor?
And we are removing however that Sue objected to, not
No, she
opined
didn't
on.
object.
No,
Yeah, you
you-
opined on.
I did.
Ruby did.
Okay, you objected
Yeah.
to it, but Sue gave the opinion that it would need to be swapped. If we eliminate
The
it,
two
does
sentences.
it still need to be swapped? That's my question.
Yes.
Okay. So we will swap those sentences, but eliminate the however.
Yes. Is that so? Oh, but you're
So
on the
it would then
nor.
read, the changes would then read, staff may communicate with individual board members about school district matters. The board members will
Will view.
view such communications with staff as personal and informal communications. Staff members and individual board members will not communicate about employment nor personnel-related matters. That's how you would now like it to read.
That's how I have the changes, if everybody agrees.
So the nor is correct? However.
Well, if it's negative, then
Not
it's
I would
communicating.
suggest to you that correct English would be, will not communicate about this or that, or
neither, neither.
will
nor.
communicate about neither this nor that.
Okay, so
Right.
not communicate about or, okay, so take out the
So
nor.
the
there.
or.
This
Yeah.
or that, neither nor that.
Okay,
That's
thank
what
you.
I,
Okay, will not communicate about employment
Or,
or
okay.
personnel-related
Right.
matters. So
Doesn't
we
it not?
will not make the change from or to nor.
Okay. And then in the second paragraph, we inserted the word first on the second line. He's got his, the first sentence of the second paragraph, we should have italicized the word first as being introduced into that as a new word.
Yes.
So it should have been italicized. It won't be on final reading, but just to let people know that that was not formally in the policy.
Yes.
I had
Good
another one
catch.
too. The other thing is, okay, in the second to the last paragraph,
Where are we, Sue?
back, under exceptions on the back of the
Exceptions,
sheet,
gotcha.
okay?
I have-
So it'd be the second paragraph under exceptions.
Okay?
I feel that you should have, if you're going to say rights of any employee, which is singular, then you have to say his or her rights.
Where would you say his or her?
Instead of
Exercise.
the-
Wishes to exercise their rights, there doesn't, that's plural.
It should be his or
It has to be his slash her, or his or her, something like that. The only other way you could do it, I mean, you could use employees.
Or you could say those.
Employees, and then
You could use the word those. So you could say,
wishes to exercise.
the rights of any employee and wishes to exercise those rights as such, without having to do the personal
Right,
pronoun,
you
right?
could,
I think I
yes.
like his or her better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So change there to his or her.
His or her. And then in the next paragraph, which is the last paragraph, it comes
Same
up
thing.
again. Yeah, to exercise shall not be construed to nullify the rights of anyone. Well, his or her, yes, that
Where?
fits better.
Oh, on top,
First,
okay.
First line, their rights, yeah.
I just like the possessive, Marie,
Mhm.
as opposed to the.
The-
Mm-hmm.
So change in the last paragraph, first sentence, there to his or her,
Yes,
okay?
okay.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Belvin?
next to the last paragraph.
Yeah,
This policy should not be construed to nullify the First Amendment rights of any employee who is also shouldn't be taxpayer, it should be registered voter or voter. The taxpayers don't need to register, doesn't give them the right to vote.
You don't have to be a voter to have the rights.
You know,
under
a
the First
taxpayer doesn't
Amendment.
have a right to vote. You can be a taxpayer and have a place up the lake and live down
But you do
Massachusetts.
have.
But you have
the
other
right to
rights.
speak.
You don't, you have the right to speak, not, it says here, "All employee who is also a taxpayer wishes to exercise their rights, school board is," yeah.
But Lloyd, you as a taxpayer, if you're not a registered voter, you still have the right to speak, and this is all about communications. So it doesn't say anything
Oh.
about
So-
voting. So you would
Like-
have the right if you were a taxpayer.
Like your summer,
town meeting.
I think it still
Town
should be, it
meeting.
still should be a voter, I think.
no, but at your summer town meeting, you don't have.
They don't have any voting rights there. They just
No,
special,
but don't-
that's a separate
But this
meeting.
policy
But don't
is not
they
about
come
voting.
and talk?
Huh?
Don't they come and speak about issues?
At the
Even though
regular
they
meeting,
can't
the
vote
regular
on
town
them?
meeting? Or
Yeah.
they have a special summer meeting for them.
Yeah.
And they can
That's not a
speak.
regular meeting, they don't make any decision, no
But they
nothing.
can speak, Lloyd. This is a
Yeah.
communication policy. This says they have the right to speak. It does not say they have the right to vote. So
Right,
basically,
if I may, if what you're suggesting we did, Lloyd, would be to limit it to voters, then then what about an employee that doesn't vote in the district but is employed here?
Yeah.
We'd be, by implication,
Who's one of-
disallowing them to speak because they're not.
Well, that was sort of, I think, the intent. We identify them as taxpayers because taxpayers have the right to come to the public meeting.
It says
So-
right here, or at town meetings, and you've got no right to say that at town meeting.
So the question is,
They
do
can't
we
vote
want
at town
all of them
meetings.
to have this
Is that
right,
mine or yours?
whether they live in the district or not?
But see,
And
it
at
says
town
at
meeting,
town
you have to
meetings,
have
they
s-
can't vote at town meetings.
Yeah.
You
Right.
can't
They
tell
can,
them.
they
But
can
they can
speak
speak
with permission.
with permission.
Permission from the group.
What if we
The
just
voters.
said, the policy shall not be construed to nullify the First Amendment rights of any employee in the district who,
I want to be citizen of the district. What about the First Amendment?
Citizen, that's
well,
better,
this is all
because
about,
you
it.
want,
The name of this policy is
About
board
employees.
staff communications. So if you think of the context to this policy, it is about staff members. And so anybody else can, I mean, we're not being all
right,
inclusive.
so if we said rights of any employee in the district who wishes to exercise his or her rights as such at the school board, school district, or town.
Now, you're opening it up wider because you're saying if you're an employee but you live in Holderness, then you have the right to speak at a meeting, and usually, and at these meetings, you say name and town if you
Right,
wish to.
right, yeah. So
this
back-
doesn't
back to
nullify,
taxpayer.
but it doesn't give permission
Yeah, so
either,
it should-
actually.
These were
eliminate-
run by Barrett Christina.
Yeah, I think taxpayer is the right word, not voter.
You okay with that, Lloyd?
I don't know yet, you got me confused, I'm
Well, we
not
do
sure, I
have-
don't,
You mean you don't know?
I know how you can't tell somebody they got the right to speak and vote in this thing here.
We're not telling them they have the right,
That's
we're
what I'm
just
saying.
saying we can't, we're not nullifying
their rights.
their rights.
Who was also a taxpayer, I don't know why the taxpayer comes in there. Also a resident in the district and wishes to, so I can see that.
Yes, you could have a taxpayer who's not a resident, but,
Oh, a
because
resident
you don't
is-
want to nullify your residents' rights either.
No, that's what I'm saying, we change it from taxpayer to resident of the district.
Or both.
Resident taxpayer, yeah. That would do it.
Yes.
But they may not be a resident in the district while they could be a taxpayer.
Right.
They could own rental property.
I'm a taxpayer up Maine, I got property up there, if I went up there, they'd throw me out end over end. If I went up there and said, I got taxable property, I'd say, don't crack any ice here. That's the way they are up there, believe me, been through it. But that's, I think that's,
Well, can we ponder that further and decide when we decide to take action if there'll be any additional changes?
I don't think there's gonna be anything drastic any either way, but I just thought it was wrong to put taxpayer there. I don't like the word taxpayer. Should be resident voter.
I've got an editorial changes to the second paragraph, last sentence.
Go ahead.
Suggest change it to the board's deliberations on problems or staff concerns. It's, doesn't, because there could be problems and there could be concerns, but the way this reads, it's problems of concerns.
Madam Chair, are you okay with that change?
Well, that had been suggested before and reverted back to this, and that was because there were other things added to the sentence which made it confusing. And again, this is the version that went to Barrett Christina, and I think our original language suggested by the New Hampshire School Board Association was problems of staff concern. Meaning, if anything that the staff are concerned about, which could be personal problems or not, were, you know, as long as they don't violate the personnel issue.
Why not just say then deliberations on staff concerns rather than problems?
What if we said issues of staff concern instead of problems?
That's better.
Issues.
Change problems to issues. Any additional comment? Okay. There being none, there's one other policy to consider for first reading regarding accessing the board's legal counsel, for policy BL. Any comments?
Am I allowed to comment?
You can comment, yes.
This says that accessing the board's legal counsel can only be done by the board chair or the superintendent with consent of the chair. In the event the chair is unavailable, the vice chair will act in the chair's stead. With prior consent from the chair, the superintendent may authorize a designee to make said contact. I believe that one of the opinions offered by the School Boards Association's legal counsel was that some other districts have authorized up to a certain amount, say a $1,000 limit, that the superintendent can expend without then getting authorization for the next amount. I just think there's a lot of issues that come up on a day-to-day, whether it's a special education question. I know that from time to time we'll get a student that's moving in, needing, where if it's a foster situation and we just need to get clarification, are we the district that's legally liable, et cetera, and we just give a quick call, get a quick answer to say, yes, you are liable for this student, proceed with it. Otherwise, we would be wasting a lot of time communicating and deliberating and then find out that we really weren't legally liable, et cetera. So I was just wondering if we may authorize some limit amount after which we would need to require authorization, because I just feel this is really very limiting.
Any other comments?
So a limited amount for the year, for the period of a year
Well,
or
for a period, and if
something, or-
that money runs out, then it would be I would have to come to the board and
Okay,
say,
you got
this is
$50.
where we've expended it, and this is why, you know, and the board would
I
say,
got the answer.
I think the intent of this is to avoid excess legal expense, but, and I think it also, and I think I clarified with the chair, that once we are in the middle, for example, we just had a significantly lengthy personnel issue. So once the board chair says, okay, you can work with the attorney, I'm on the phone every couple days trying to iron things out and going back and forth and trying to negotiate a settlement or whatever. In a case like that, this basically says, I just, you know, the way it's written, it isn't clear. as to how often I'd need to get permission
Yeah,
to
I
access
understand.
council.
Well, I think that at the meeting, we discussed the pre-authorized amount and decided not to include that. And if you have prior consent of the chair to discuss with the attorney an ongoing settlement, then you don't need authorization every time you have to call about that. It's a
Well, I'm just
dynamic.
saying, when it's a policy, and it could be a different chair, and it could be a different superintendent, and it could, once you set a policy, I just want to make sure that just because we have whatever unspoken agreement about a certain situation, when you set policy,
Well,
Yeah.
Is
I
it-
will speak to that next as well. And the idea of putting the policy in place is to gain control of the legal expenditures entirely. And we can always change if it turns out to be impractical for reasons that you cite, that we should give an allowance. However, the intent of the policy is to gain control of budgetary expenditures and ensure that they not be made without the knowledge of the board chair or the vice chair in the chair's absence. Mr. Christina did comment that my original language, which was proposed to the committee, tried to capture that balance regarding emergency situations. It was simplified to what we have before us, and I think that if we go with this as written, we can try to make it work. If it turns out to be impractical, we should make the change.
Sure.
Don?
In order to gain, additional control, I feel that we need to know what the rates are of the law firm and to even put it up for, to receive proposals for the board to make a selection of a law firm
I do have that
with their
information.
rates.
I do have that information.
I think what we're hearing from Don is that you want to amend this policy.
Yes.
Okay. I would like to comment on that. I'm opposed to amending the policy to include the information that Don speaks of. Not because it's not prudent to have that, but that more fully expands this policy than is currently necessary. It is prudent to have that. It is operational sane to have that, and that we should know what it is, particularly for purposes of making the decision whether to grant the superintendent or her designee the ability to spend the district's money. However, to incorporate that in the policy that's simply stated as we've presented, I think is more than is necessary, because if we do that, then what's to say that we shouldn't also add to that we have detailed knowledge of the resumes of all the attorneys that are going to be involved. And it could get a little bit absurd as to the level of detail that you would go. So I object to expanding the policy beyond the simple statement that says permission from the board chair, or in the chair's absence, the vice chair to grant consent. We'll see if we can make that work. I acknowledge that it's prudent to have that data, and since it was raised at the policy meeting, the superintendent has obtained that information.
But additional comment?
Sure, go ahead.
We do that in selecting our auditor, so why not use the same methodology for selecting our law firm?
Simply because the issue is to control the expenditures made by the district with the district's legal counsel, and it's not the same as with the auditor.
Huh. They're making more than we are. Let's move along.
Dan, did you have a comment? Okay.
I think
Sue?
it was brought up too when we were discussing this, your attorneys, our attorneys, because they've been with us for years, do have a lot of our background. So if you did have another firm, you'd have to acquaint them with a lot of background that they don't have, which would cost some money. So you have to take that into consideration.
Sure, and that's a subject and justification for not making a change to legal firms, I agree. Consideration to be sure. Any further comment? Okay, there being none, we'll proceed to the next item. We are now at personnel. Maternity, resignation, nominations, support staff, program specialists, administration, and professionally ripped staff, for lack of a better term,
So to take that in order,
and leaves of absence.
to take this in order, they should be more likely used as family leave or child rearing leave than maternity. I have two requests, one from Abby Nelson, who works 2 days a week as the Danbury guidance person, and Rita Freecott, who is the grade 3-4 Danbury teacher. So there's two requests for child rearing leave.
Okay?
Any other questions on those? And then I have 3 resignations, which would be Laura Landry, who is currently, you had nominated to next year to be the special ed teacher in Bristol. Amber Bacco, that you had nominated to be next year's first grade teacher in Bristol Elementary School. And Anna Kate Hatton, that you had nominated to be the literacy specialist in Danbury. So those are 3 resignations that I'll be looking for a motion. And I have copies of all the letters for the secretaries. As far as, actually, the leaves of absence and the return, no, I have another return. I don't have
We have nominations next.
that. I know. But then I saw leaves of absence. Okay, so for nominations, I've given the board in non-public a packet of all the nomination lists. And there are the 1,100 114s and 1,200 114s that one would call paraprofessionals, if you want to move those together. The second list would be all other support staff, which would include secretaries, administrative assistants in the buildings, custodians, food service. The third list is, which is on page 4, would be program specialists, which are all of these singleton positions. There's either 1 or 2 of those in the district. And the fourth list is the administrators. So I'm suggesting we combine list 1 and 2, and therefore we could look at those as paraprofessionals, second, all other support staff, third, program specialists, and fourth, go to the administrators. And are there any other questions with any of those nominations?
Any further discussion on the nominations?
Can I bring up what I want to bring up now or later?
You can certainly mention what your plan is, and when the motion time comes, you can make the formal motion.
So my plan is, when the time comes, when we act on these, there are 2 to be determined special services positions, which are special education not assigned to specific students. And I will recommend that the money for those 2 positions be moved to the 1,100 114, which is the academic interventionist, because we've proven that the response to intervention works, and we've cut 5 positions in that area. So I would rather have the money spent there.
Just for clarification, these are identified now as TBDs, to be determined.
If you were to nominate them as paraprofessionals, then we can adjust them from one code to the other.
Right, I think I would rather nominate them as academic interventionists to be determined, so.
So again, just want to clarify that if you do that, we have the TBDs because we have students identified who are going to need those one-on-ones per their IEPs. So if you move them to academic interventionist and those kids move in that we're anticipating coming, we will have to then move them back in order to meet the letter of the law for their IEPs.
But it doesn't say 1-to-1 next to either one of those positions.
They are one-to-one positions, we believe. But again, I keep saying it, as kids are coming and going and moving in and all the IEPs are being finalized, I just want the flexibility to say that the board understands that it would be our preference to have the funding go for academic interventionists, but when we overload our population of students requiring IEPs, sometimes we have to pull them from that.
We would expect, in support of Ruby's comments, to do it that way, that you would come to us and explain that a change needs to be had.
My only fear with that is that our meetings are a month apart, and these kids move in on a weekly basis. So that's, we need to, we can struggle for a couple of days, and we actually had a situation at the high school this year where we had some students who were not receiving their services because we were so short on personnel until we could make some other arrangements. So my fear is to have to come.
Well, what if that would have happened the day after a meeting?
Then we'd have to wait another whole month till the
But we
next
would,
meeting.
right?
Pardon?
But we would.
Well, whose services would I mean, if you have a student with an IEP, are you going to be content that I'm not servicing him for another month?
Well, what's the practical reality there? Is that exactly the way it happens?
Yeah, we have kids coming and going all the time, and we'll get a call and say, oh, this child just moved in. In fact, I just got
Is there no time taken to evaluate whether the IEP that currently
Oh,
exists
absolutely.
continues merit?
Yeah. And those
So-
are all done prior to the child moving in, but
Do you
sometimes,
go on the prior district's creation of the IEP?
until we can review, we have to legally follow the IEP until
Okay,
anyone can
but
be
those
established.
meetings don't happen regularly either, right?
Yeah, they do,
Well, I mean, not daily.
as needed. So if we have a situation where a court ordered change in custody, or, going from a custodial family who lives here into foster placement, now, well, that's the opposite. We would have to we would have to pay another district to put a para in there. But if the child had this change in their address, or their change in guardianship, which happens on a, you saw, Judy's report, 10 new students came into the district this month.
Yes, and of the 240 that have IEPs right now, or 244,
Yeah.
there's 36 that have one-on-one
Right,
requirements.
right.
So the substantial majority don't have one-on-one
Right.
requirements.
Right, but I'm just saying, if somebody does have a one-on-one requirement, do we have the flexibility to meet their IEP until they can be evaluated or changed? That's the only thing I'm asking. It's just, you can approve the total number of positions, but what flexibility do we have to actually operate the district according to law? That's my point. I just want to make sure that we are able to make the decisions we need to make. And as board chair, I would always keep you informed if there was that need.
How many academic interventionists are also qualified to be
Paraprofessionals.
Most of our
special
academic,
services?
these lists are somewhat interchangeable for the most part, but not always. So if I have a student that comes in with severe physical disabilities, I may not need an academic interventionist that happens to have a teaching degree. I may need someone who is able to just meet.
Do OT.
We had someone who was actually certified OT, but physically didn't have the stamina to lift this child in and out of a chair that position required. So it's a case-by-case basis to see which is the right person for the right situation. It depends on the child and what they need.
But I guess what I was getting to was that if those positions were moved to the paraprofessional page, that would communicate that we would prefer to have an academic interventionist, but if the need was required,
That's all I'm asking for.
then you could move them.
Right, that's what I'm asking for.
Yeah. Is that your intent?
Well, do you have that flexibility anyway already?
We've never come back to you. What we've done every year since I've been here, this is my 7th round through, is the board will approve the number of positions. As needs happen, we don't come to the board every time we need a new one. Dan has a contingency line for special ed. So if I got a family who moves into the district with 3 kids who all need one-on-ones, we just hire them because we have to. And then he reconciles that with the contingency line. We have not heretofore been requested by the board to come for additional personnel. And I'm hearing this board say that you'd like to do that. I'm asking for the flexibility to have to make those decisions on the spot and then at the next meeting reconcile the list with you and say, this is what we had to do and this is why, et cetera.
I don't know if my recommending that we move these precludes that.
Well, that's, I just want to clarify.
Yeah, it just states a preference that we prefer academic interventionists who help us prevent the need for more special services later on.
So would all of our administrators concur with that. We were just instructed during budget season to make some cuts, and we stated publicly that we were cutting 5 academic interventionists. And for transparency purposes, we cut 5 academic interventionist positions. So as a vote by the board to reinstate 2 of those with TBDs is, we love that idea, but I just want to be very honest about how we did that.
Got it. Any other comments?
As far as the administrative personnel and one of the program specialists, I just want the public to understand that the list includes a new associate principal to be the principal over both the Bristol Elementary, associate principal over both the Bristol Elementary School and the Bridgewater Hebron Village School, working under the supervision of Dana Andrews, who would be the supervising principal for both of those schools. And I know that we talked about this in non-public, but where it's a new person coming into the district, I don't know if the board wants to indulge Paul to just introduce the process or why we have chosen this individual, or for time's sake not to. And the second is a program specialist. We have a new, actually that person's name is Malay Jala, who is coming to us with 3 years of assistant principal experience, having worked in 2 different elementary schools in Golden, Colorado. And prior to that, having 9 years of special education certification and experience, including working with students with severe needs, both EH, which is emotionally handicapped students, which tend to be some of our most challenging. We thought that was a good match for BES's population. And then we also have a food service director that we're going to be nominating as a program specialist, who's coming to us most recently from the Spalding Youth Center. His name is Philip Dallin. So I have resumes for anybody in the public that would like to know a little bit more about them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, while we're on the topic, did you want to comment on the search committee at all?
I can if you want me to.
Just briefly, just to share with us the methodology and the decision.
With the search, the search committee had 4 applicants for the associate principal. We tried very hard to pick somebody from within because of all the, for lack of a better term, riffing that's being done. But the gentleman that we selected is, we feel, going to be a big benefit to the school system. And that's the long and the short of it. Not that the internal candidates were not qualified. This guy was just much more qualified.
Thank you.
And then the final category that I had asked in the beginning of the meeting to add to the nomination list are to bring back some of the people that had been reduced in force. So tonight we would like to nominate Lisa Kessler to be a grade 1 teacher at Bristol Elementary School, Christina Beadle to be the special education teacher at Bristol Elementary School, Barbara Weatherby to be the literacy specialist at the Danbury Elementary School, and Jay Parringer to teach grade 6 social studies. There's been a couple of transfers associated with that. So some of the positions that, basically Jennifer La Rochelle, who is currently the grade 8 literacy teacher and team leader for 8th grade, has agreed to teach the grade 3-4 multi-age at Danbury Elementary School, bringing her experience as a multi-age teacher from the Hebron school when it was Hebron by itself. And then we would be moving Jason Hill to grade 7 literacy and Paul Ronci to grade 8 literacy.
And who's the 5th?
So there's just 4, Lisa Kessler,
I thought we
Christina.
were bringing back 5.
No, 4. We still have a vacancy. We had 5 resignations, but we still have a vacancy with a 2-day-a-week guidance position in Danbury. So that was the 5th resignation.
Okay.
There were 5 openings. We have 4 replacements.
Okay.
We have a vacancy for 2 days a week in Danbury for a guidance counselor.
Leaves of absence?
I covered that under child rearing leave, so I think that's a duplication, I'm sorry.
Okay. Field trips. I think we have one requested field trip.
We do.
Boston Museum of Science, June 11th. Any questions? Okay. Item I, replacement of Groton School Board Representative. I have a letter of resignation from Mr. Polito that I would like to share with you. If you could give a copy to each of the board members, I appreciate it. Do I have enough here?
I have one. If you need that, I have one
Okay.
that you gave me.
And Vinnie, do you have a copy for the clerk to append?
Not yet. We don't know what we're going to do with it. I'd like to give you a moment to read it.
I know you didn't answer this question, Minnie. What's primum non nocere, or whatever that is? You're the guy to ask on that, not me. That's,
That means do no harm.
First.
is that what it is?
First, do no harm.
Don't know if that's what it means. I never would have got that out of that. I majored in English, not broken. Was that French?
Latin.
Okay, couple things. Check with Barrett Christina on whether we are obligated to take any action on this, and he says the statute is silent. And because it's silent, he says, I'm inclined to think that the resignation becomes effective when it is tendered. Now, we need to discuss what we intend to do to replace the Groton representative, and that's the subject of the discussion at the moment. I will say that Lou did request that his letter of resignation be appended to the minutes, so that those who might be interested in knowing why he resigned could become aware of that. But it's up to the board what action we want to take on the resignation itself, if any. And I would say also that he advised that were we not able to agree on a replacement, then according to the RSA, the towns, in this case Groton Board of Selectmen, would be in a position to assign a replacement. So he does say he would urge the board to accept the resignation and move forward with an appointment process. So, clarification.
I think we should accept the resignation and advertise for anyone from Groton who's interested to take his place.
Okay,
And that advertisement should include a posting at the Groton Town Hall where people from Groton will see it.
Okay, we have 3 papers of record, which are the Record Enterprise, the Laconia Daily Sun, and the Laconia Citizen, correct? Perhaps we could consider directing the superintendent to put a public notice along the lines of what's been worded in the past, substituting the town of Groton for whatever was done in the past, and advertise it immediately in preparation.